G'day folks, welcome to this overview of Scenario 2 to save Bastogne from Wacht am Rhein. I've just completed this. This is a bit of a learning scenario. It uses a condensed sequence of play, basically mode determination, construction, movement. There are exploit phases, but I didn't really draw on that. There weren't too many opportunities, and there's a combat phase and administration phase. So it is part of the sort of Wacht am Rhein sequence of scenarios to introduce players to the game, which I've been running through. Played the fight for Kessenich some time ago. It really focused on learning prepared assaults, tactical movement, really close combat movement. This scenario introduced what did it introduce? More elements, more construction opportunities, more room for maneuver, a much greater map size. You can see the boundaries of the map using those white markers. So it's fairly, decent size. Gives the Germans in particular opportunities for maneuver. It introduced trucks, which was kind of a frustrating experience. I certainly learnt the limitations of trucks. We got to grip with some of the finer details of ammunition depletion, as you can see on the map here. And we're starting to see elements of fuel and supply at a simplified level. So as a second scenario, it was really good. I really took my time with this. This can be played quite quickly by experienced players. I'd imagine 3-4 hour scenario. It took me a couple of weeks just because I would take a turn, reflect on the rules, look over what I'd done wrong and continue. So I was sort of really taking my time to reread the rules as I went through. And I'm really picking things up. Still making a lot of mistakes though. So some of the common errors I'm making, and just kind of raising this to alert other new players as well, is a reminder to check ammunition depletion after artillery fire. I missed that a lot. I had erroneously played the armor anti-tank die roll modifiers in combat. I think that was pretty important, particularly in the early turns when the Germans do have armor superiority and they weren't gaining the plus 10s that they were entitled to. They were only getting plus 5, and they did miss out on a couple of positive modifiers that could have really changed the results. Suddenly, when you have a series of combats, those a plus 10 from having 2 extra armor factors can probably make it a difference over time. What else was I doing wrong? I think I was still confused early on with the difference between sort of rough wooded and forest terrain. I think I've got that in my head now, mainly because of the CRT charts, or the terrain effects charts that I was using were sort of black and white or poor color quality, my own fault. I tried to use exploitation, but just could never have the opportunity to do so. We did have an overrun over here, which I think seemed to work out okay. So no concerns there. Still not entirely sure. The rules on regimental integrity aren't perfectly clear. I'm still not entirely convinced that I'm playing that correctly. But some of those are a bit tricky. The biggest issue I'm encountering is the fiddliness of these counters accidentally flipping over. You may have seen if you've watched some of the playthroughs. Picking up stacks and I'll accidentally bump a counter and it'll flip. And I wasn't sure what side it was originally on. Luckily, I kind of take photos to go back and check some of those details from time to time. I am in particular, I feel like I'm decent with the construction rules, but I am struggling to find the time and space to engage in construction. So you need to get your engineers kind of in a position to be constructing. And as soon as the scenario started, I know now I should have put my engineers around here and started building constructions, building improved positions and so forth. But instead I tried to send them out as close as possible to the front. So lesson learned there. And again, I can learn the rules, but it's learning how to implement those rules, which is sort of the next step. And I'm learning to get the engineers building as quickly as possible. And maybe, I kept these engineering battalions together. Maybe I should have broken them up into a series of companies. So I was thinking these battalions can construct quickly. They can do quick construction. It's done in a turn. But if I break them up into 3 companies, I can do 3 one-turn slower constructions, and then I've built 3 improved positions over the course of sort of a turn in a bit. But yeah, it might get things done in the long term when I'm building many different and improved positions and defensive works. It might get things done quicker. So mode determination, I did have a few things where I was like, oh, I'll switch the mode here, and I'll do quick movement. So I've got to be careful that I stick to the modes. Construction I've just mentioned. Movement phase, I need to continuously refer to the terrain effects chart. There are so many different movement rates. Whether you're using leg or mech road, they do vary quite a lot, and there are a lot of subtle differences. So you've got sort of woods and forest hexes and towns, and I'm still struggling a little bit. This scenario, it's the first scenario it sort of introduced constricted terrain. This scenario didn't really use it too much. The Germans were keen to avoid that and just get out into the open. The Allies picked their defensive terrain quite well, and were keen to hold on to that ground. So they were using their discretionary hit options quite effectively, holding the ground and taking step losses when they needed to, and retreating when they needed to. So I'm kind of getting the handle on those discretionary hits rules pretty well and using those effectively. The CRT and combat process is becoming pretty intuitive. I feel I'm getting the handle on that. What I do need to do, and what I will do for future scenarios, is I'm going to get a notepad and take notes on all these modifiers, because what's happening is I'm using markers on the CRT to show the row, but there are so many different... the column shifts are easy to work out, but when I'm coming to the dice roll modifiers, there are only 4 key areas of dice roll modifiers: combat reserve, regimental integrity bonus, proficiency ratings, and armor. But by the time I'm adding plus 10 and then minus 5 and plus 15 and minus 20, and you do that sort of... You're effectively doing 8 times, 4 categories, but once per side. I forget. And so I'm going to get a notepad and jot all these down. And I highly recommend that for anyone also learning the series. Breakdown is very important. I did have some breakdown units early in the scenario, and they were very important. I had the AT, Z-step units. I did have some... I broke down, I think, a hybrid formation of the CCR 9th Armoured, which was... don't think they were too effective, but that's sort of my own fault. But I am getting a handle on those rules. And exploitation, again, there were exploitation phases here. I just didn't use it effectively. And then, of course, ammunition depletion, which you can see, which was very interesting. It was really good to see how that worked in practice. There was no ammunition replenishment in this scenario. And of course, the biggest rule that I missed was the rest turn, and I will be sure to count that in future. The Germans were using the night phases a bit too eagerly, and neither the Germans nor the Americans were having a rest turn on each day. So I'll need to be mindful of that. And again, a notepad would help to keep track of that. I'm going to try and stick as much as possible to using night turns as rest turns, but the Germans do have some flexibility. They don't have to use the night turns. The Americans do as rest turns. So yeah, all in all, this is a good scenario. And I would say as well, as a learning scenario, it is replayable. I'm keen to kind of progress to see what else Wacht am Rhein. So I'll be moving to the next scenario, which is there's a scenario group of scenarios here, but December 16th scenario group. But I'm keen to see how these other scenarios play out. But I would have no concerns at returning to this scenario to try some different tactics, see what happens. If the Germans maybe can get a stronger force to loop around here, because you've got the bulk of the 9th Armoured, 10th Armoured, CCR, CCB respectively along here. They're in this area. They come in here and then shift to the east, which kind of leaves this gap as the 101st Airborne arrives and drives up that road. It's easier for the Germans to quickly maneuver around these positions before the 101st can really be set up. And it's worth pointing out, there's not a lot of good defensive terrain out here in the west-northwest. You've got rough woods throughout this area, which really helps the Americans. You've got forests down here, which helps them. But you don't have that same... You can just see this little corridor here, west-northwest, even clear terrain here. So yeah, the key emphasis there is the replayability of this scenario. tempting. I definitely fought the fight for Keswick, the first scenario, at least twice, 2.5 times, I think. And this could be done again if you desire. So moving on to the next scenario, I'm very happy with the scenario, and yeah, keen to dive in more. And as I said, I keep reading and rereading the rules. I have charts everywhere, charts galore, and I'll have that notepad ready for the next scenario. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and take care.